I'm going to send the PowerPoint that Gary, I guess you shared, right? With
Yeah.
a lot of diagrams. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got about halfway through it, making some, putting my interpretation into it, just for conversation.
Yeah.
Let me just attach that and send it.
Is that the quadrant patterns presentation?
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that's it.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I
Mhm.
did that a couple of years ago, and Thomas Wong had put his 5 elements all over it as well.
Hmm. If I can find out where it is.
I'm confused. What do you say? Is somebody sending something?
I'm sending a PowerPoint that Gary had sent out before, for quadrant patterns in system something or other translation. Mhm.
You just emailed it?
I haven't yet. I'm just about to push the
No,
button.
no, it's-
I was editing it. I got about halfway through it.
Yeah, I think I sent it Sunday or Monday, didn't I? I think.
Now, if you want, I could just share that and
Yeah,
we could
share it, John.
go through it for discussion.
Yeah.
All right, well,
Yeah.
let's do that. Let's do that. Okay, so I'll do a screen share here.
Are you allowed to?
Yeah. I remember to enable it.
Oh,
I don't normally.
no. Ah, got it.
Ah,
So I've sent the file, but that's not necessary, I guess, because now here's the PowerPoint. Let me get this on proper presentation here. It's a way to do this. I'll just know it. Yeah, that's better. Does that show up right?
yeah, that's good.
Oh, okay. So this is what Gary sent. So you said this was done a few years ago?
Yeah, it was done. It was so it kind of been growing, but I shared it with quite a few of the ISSS people about 2 years ago. I think it was January 2019. I first shared it.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so I guess there's been a lot of thinking since then.
Yeah.
So this was kind of cool.
Yeah, I quite like this.
Yeah. You could see, if you read, this is of course much more concise, but I think if you look at, here, I'm going to get my view changed here because I have too many windows in the way. Okay.
Yeah, so that's quite a nice expression of the 4 causes, I think.
Yeah, where did that come from? Who
It comes
wrote
from
that?
Greek mythology.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this fits with some of my historical studies, because if you just grasp the whole of this and then look at what was in the Rig Veda, which there it is. You can just obviously this is the Sanskrit, and then here's the English. So you can just read through the English translations. Now, I have used some of my own words here because everybody has a slightly different translation and interpretation, and I tried to make it more modern and understandable in our terms.
I have to say, it doesn't mean a lot to me.
Well, I'm just pointing out the similarity between this and the Greek.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the Gaia the same Gaia that Lovelace
Yeah,
used?
Yes, it's the Earth. And everything
Okay.
on the Earth. Yeah.
Well, actually, it was William Golding who gave it to the word to Lovelace.
Yeah.
I happen to have been taught my English by William Golding.
Yeah.
So it meant something to me.
I could talk you through the Greek one. and explain how I interpret that, if that would be interesting.
Sorry?
I could talk through the Greek one and
Yeah, okay.
explain, what it means to me,
Yeah,
because I think there is a lot of interpretation in this. It probably means different things to different people. Yeah.
Oh,
So so when we so in the beginning there was only chaos. So this is lots of information, and systems have not yet been identified. Yeah, it's the bottom left of the Kinefin model. Yeah, so perceived chaos for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
and out of the void appeared Erebus. So a system has now been identified. Yeah, this is the inevitable place where death dwells and night. All else was empty, silent, endless darkness. Then somehow love was born, bringing a start of order. So now we have we have perceived complexity. Yeah, and from love came light and day, and once there was light and day. So light and day, these are forces that are emerging from the order. And once there was light and day, Gaia the earth appeared. So we now have a material substance. So I do see the four causes there.
oh, yeah, yeah. Well, now if we go to the Vedic, before creation. So in the beginning, what do we mean by beginning? These are introspective philosophers trying to reason through a paradox, where we exist and we can't imagine the origin of that existence. So before creation, and we don't really know what before means, but prior to if you think in terms of ontologies, it's saying, well, what ontology are we going to assume for our existence? It may not be a time sequence. It may not be a Big Bang was the literal temporal beginning, and then things happened after that. It could be more of a philosophical origin, the way I read it. Anyway, before creation, there was neither nothingness nor existence. So there's your void. There was no air then, nor the heavens beyond it. What covered it? Where was it? In whose keeping? Was there a cosmic ocean in depths unfathomed? In other words, was there something there? So they had a lot of trouble thinking about existence coming out of total nothingness. They said that can't work in there, from what they intuited. So there was neither eternal death nor eternal life. Well, that was in your Greek thing too. Nor was there discrimination between night and day. There was oneness existing of its own breath and self-sustaining. I have no problem saying that's, somehow love was born, because it's a unity existing of itself. Beyond that, there was nothing. Before known existence, darkness was hidden by darkness. Indistinguishable, all was fluid. That one existing without context arose. Now, words like context, I'm putting in there because they have current meaning. But there's a lot of flexibility in how the Sanskrit is to be interpreted. I think one of the interpretations had used the word covering without covering, and things like that. Born of the power of, and there's, again, the Sanskrit word is tapas, which can mean penance or sacrifice, but it's the image is of a an ascetic performing very and austerity is another thing. You're very austere, but focused attention, trying to get beyond the body to see reality. And so it's a tremendous force of will, in fact, to to do that tapas. So I said, well, this is the power of will, which to me is the big unknown in the holon, is how will plays into it. In the beginning, intention descended on it. That was the primal seed born of the mind. The sages, seeking in their hearts with wisdom, discovered the bond between existent and non-existent, between the existent and non-existent. Well, to me, this is the relation between, you know, the two halves of the holon.
Mm.
And that unity extended across the void. Was there anything prior to it or after it? Intrinsic. So that's questioning the idea of the beginning being a literal time beginning. Intrinsic relations separated its mighty forces. Below was energy, over it was impulse. Again, the holon view, we have an energetic temporal world, and then we have a intentional or inferential world above it or related to it. Who truly knows? Who shall here declare from where it all came? What is the source of this creation? So this is the big question that they were trying to address. You know, the gods arose, and this to me is really profound. The gods arose with the creation of the universe. In other words, if the universe is whole, then even the gods had to come with it, they're saying. So who truly knows the source? I mean, there was nothing before creation. And so even the creator came with creation. And so how could he know anything about it? So whence this creation has arisen, whether it was created or not, he who surveys it all from the highest heaven, he knows it, or maybe even he does not know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the, it kind of strikes me because this is the oldest writing transcribed from oral tradition. You know, it's the oldest writing on earth.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
we're wrestling with the exact same questions. And I don't think we have any better answers.
Yeah. It does resonate with me, and you know, I feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other
But there's
thing I think-
clearly a strong relation between this and the Greek one
Yeah.
that you had.
Yeah.
And the Greeks were trying to study the Vedic philosophy. They had a big problem though, because of Alexander the Great. He was trying to conquer India. He didn't succeed. He eventually got kicked out. But it was very difficult for anybody to travel from Greece, any of the philosophers to travel from Greece to India. And mostly they got as far as the Middle East and met people who had traveled from India to the Middle East. And they communicated in that way. And I think it's clear from a lot of the Greek philosophy that they were interpreting and reflecting the Vedic, and in fact, screwing it up in a few ways.
Mm. Mm. One of the things I'd like to do with this, I'd like to overlay Bill's transformational powers, you know, the 9 powers, because I think that would be an interesting exercise to do.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
I'm trying to take this back to a higher level of generality for a moment. Right. I think what you're saying is that there has always been a realization amongst human beings that the way we think is related to the way we understand the world around us, and we come to conclusions about it.
Yeah.
And people have tried to formalize that either through religion or belief systems or whatever, because that is part of being human. Is that a sense?
Yeah.
A generalization?
Yeah.
Why?
In fact, there's a paradox because we have perception, and that separates us from anything that we want to perceive, even our own existence or origin. And so it creates a paradox, and it may not be a completely resolvable paradox, you know.
Well,
So,
I'm going to look at this from a very practical point of view, in case it helps. I believe that the limitations in our perceptions are essential to our survival. Take, for example, if you want to be able to drive a car, then you have to before it gets into your brain, you have to filter out most of the information and only select certain really important bits. Otherwise, you'll run into somebody else, basically. On the other hand, in some circumstances, you think really deeply and long term and so on, and you ask yourself, hey, what do I need to know about those stars out there and how I'm going to navigate around the world from them? In other words, you're asking yourself a very far-sighted and abstracted question and then you condition, and this is the point, you condition your perception. So if, as a navigator, I learn to navigate and I condition my perceptions as to what I want to know, and then I get quicker and quicker and better at it. And some of the early navigators did fantastically well. I mean, Joshua Slocum navigated himself around the world with a battered old alarm clock. He had no accurate timekeeper at all, but he was able actually to correlate his sightings on the moon and the sightings on the sun to enable him to know that he was the other side of Cape Horn. And he even made a curious mistake in the text of his book, which I've always maintained. He said he had a problem with his alarm clock, so he boiled it. Well, actually, what he meant was oiled it. Which I found fascinating, because the early stages, or my introduction to mathematics, was through navigation. So I obtained an understanding from this from a different point of view, which wasn't a religious point of view, but it was one of practice. So we can have any perceptions are dependent upon points of view.
Mm.
And that's a generality, which is true. And it is essential that we filter the stuff, because if we got all the information we could have coming in, we just could get totally confused.
Possibly, yeah.
Well,
Well, you have to have a way of ordering that information.
Exactly. Well, we're trying to do that a bit with pattern recognition in computers and so on, but it's still fairly limited as to the understanding we get even from that.
I was trying to write a response to Gary's latest message, where Gary, you were saying, well, it's difficult to think through all these words sometimes. And the thing that I realized is that what I'm doing, it's very easy for me to come up with the words. And the reason is that I'm already locked into this holon view. And what I'm doing is I'm reasoning from the general, which I accept wholeheartedly, to the specific. So then the specifics come easily, because the only words I choose are the ones that fit in the general picture.
No, I get it.
Well, we're not taught to think that way. We're taught to think from the specific to the general. We're supposed to infer the general from the data. And if someone comes along and say, well, this is the general view and it's true of everything, we treat that as a religion. And we don't want to just accept one. And so, okay, there can be many interpretations of the data, and let's explore them all. So what's going on here is reasoning from the general idea of a holon. Is that science or is it religion? And frankly, I think it's both, because even though we profess the ethic of reasoning from data without any preconcept of what the general picture is going to turn out to be, we don't in fact do that. Even in science, there's always a reality assumption that's made, without which you can't even decide what the variables are going to be.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit disingenuous to think that we can reason from specific to general. But the result of believing that is that we get sort of tacit religions, and I'm using religion now in the sense that the literal sense, religio from the Latin, which is a belief system. It doesn't necessarily have to be a theological belief. So a belief in mechanism is a religion in that sense.
Hmm.
And so we adopt them, but the real issue is, do we question them? And there's a process in science where we do. Once you get into once the construction starts to produce paradoxes, then you go, okay, there's something wrong with my worldview. I can equate worldview with religion if you want. I'm not I'm speaking very generally. So the worldview is how we think reality should turn out to be, and the science, the practical science is collecting data and discovering patterns and trying to build a detailed construction of how that works. But it'll turn in. But if you don't have the right concept of nature, the description will end up producing paradoxes. And that's a great test. That's a great key, indicator that it's time to go back to the drawing board and reassess the assumptions and change the worldview. So that's the ethic that we're taught, is to do it in this sort of punctuated equilibrium, where the worldview gets updated only when we run into trouble with the detailed description. But now I'm proposing something very different. With this holon, I'm saying that it's true of all systems that they have this whole pattern in the causality. And I'm looking for exceptions. I'm trying to do it scientifically and say, well, okay, using that particular view and rewriting the equations accordingly for different disciplines, does it produce a paradox? And if it does, then I know there's something wrong with the holon view. And so far, I haven't found one. Even going to the extremes of looking at cosmology and the origin of the universe and dark energy and all that, the questions that come up aren't out of the box. They're exactly the questions that have come up in cosmology.
Okay, you have a particular holon view. Is that right, John?
Yes, very specific,
Yes.
based on the four causes and their closure. So it's saying that everything in nature is understandable as part of cyclical causation.
Yeah. Okay. Now, to me, the reason the whole thing immediately becomes attractive when I understand why you're putting forward this way of looking at things, right? And have a practical example that I can relate to, where this, looking at it, has made a substantial difference, a worthwhile difference. And I'm just being perfectly, I'm just trying to behave like an engineer, if you like, because on that basis, there are lots of things I don't understand, but it's not worthwhile my spending the effort and time trying to understand them.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's an uncertainty which has, in my view, a considerable potential if we could understand it.
Mm.
In which case it's worthwhile making the investment in effort to work on it and understand it and get it
Yeah.
right. Now, so by looking at it that way, what I've found is, and this has been, if you like, when I got into change, what's been in the past called change management, I've found that if the potential is big enough, then people will suspend their disbelief
Mhm.
and work through the alternative view and see if they can reconcile that
Mhm.
with all the other things they're depending upon.
Right.
And then, and that's exactly what we did when we persuaded or managed to get British Airways and British Airports Authority to rethink how they developed and designed Terminal 5. And that's exactly what we did with Maui when we discovered that we could reduce the, if we changed the way they thought about the problem, they could reduce the cost of Maui B from $1.2 billion to $400 million and achieve everything they otherwise intended to achieve.
Mhm.
Now, the way I put it to them at the time was, if you've got $800 million in your pocket, it's worthwhile doing some research to make it work.
Well,
and they did, and it worked.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what I'm saying is, I think if we think this from the point of view, not of us, but of those people looking on us, you follow me? And I'm trying to avoid words like customer and so on, because that has a whole set of baggage attached to it.
Yeah.
It's people we're trying to work, and this is why purpose becomes, to my mind, so important. Because if we're saying, well, our purpose is what defines what we do in engineering.
Yeah.
So let us be very clear about that purpose, why we're doing it. And then if we look at this in a different way,
Yeah.
we may be able to do this much more effectively, efficiently, eliminate the problems which have been bugging us for God knows how many centuries and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So that's the way I sort of feel we ought to be moving to take this forward. Because I think that my guts feel, I'm sorry, it is only a gut reaction, my guts feel there's something really important here. And I've learned to rely on my guts a bit.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly my gut feeling too, is I felt like it was a tremendous discovery. You know, it's like the Da Vinci Code or something, you know, there's this pattern in nature. And if that turns out to be true, my goodness, that shortcuts a great deal of exploration in the wrong direction, you know. But then you end up looking like a religion, because then you're coming from this sort of fait accompli, you know, you know,
Well,
where
I would change the
you know
language.
the answer, and now we can go reason backwards, you know.
I would change the language, it's the only personal view, to belief system, right? As opposed to religion, to avoid
Oh,
a
of
lot of the
course, yeah.
baggage.
I put it in those terms for us because
Yeah.
I don't
But
want
what
to
I'm
make any
saying is
bones about it, you know.
that we've got to think of the, I think this has been said several times, we've got to think of the audience we're trying to convince.
Right.
And at the moment, religion,
But
well,
you see, it always comes up because it's going to be in the back of the mind. As soon as you start saying, well, we have this general picture of systems and it applies to everything. Well, there's a lot of people, the red flags are going off, you know, and you're going, oh, okay, this is some kind of a religious nut, you know. And so you have to convince them, first off, that our traditional idea of mechanism is a religion.
well, I've found that tends not to work.
Yeah.
What I've tried to do is to say, to limit my ambitions to the general theory of everything on the basis that nobody's ever actually discovered a general theory of everything,
Mhm.
even in science and all the rest of it. So maybe it's a bit over ambitious, and maybe actually creating, because it doesn't seem to be practical, they're not going to invest in it. They're not going to invest their efforts in something that they don't believe could work. There's no evidence to prove that it could work. So as far as systems thinking is concerned, I've tried to contain that aspect of it and to communicate it in terms of its value to the people who are using it.
No, I think it's deeper than that, because it's not that people are skeptical of using a method that they're not sure will work. And you need to have some evidence. And the thing is that all the evidence says it does work, and all the examples work, and that's not believed. So it's a much deeper resistance. It's a resistance to any kind of holistic orientation.
Well, you're right, except that we're just on, I think, on a, I don't know what to call it. We're at an unfreeze state of the world at this moment. And the reason is that there are several concurrent issues which require the collaboration of everybody to make them work.
Yeah.
So that's the unfreeze, and we can at least say that this approach will help us to deal with that type of problem.
Yeah.
In the same way as Lovelace was successful in
Lovelock.
actually getting the Gaia model into NASA. You realize that actually Lovelace's success,
It's Lovelock, by the way.
Lovelock's success.
Yeah, Lovelace was a different kind of model.
Yeah, sorry. I'm my names are terrible. Lovelock, you're quite correct. But what he did was he was employed by NASA to develop a sensor they could use to discover whether there was life outside the universe. Right, that was what he was asked to do. And he therefore started to demolish, or try to demolish, the perceptions or preceptions that his colleagues had, biologists particularly had, about how you detected life and so on and so forth. And I believe that the story goes something like he was about to be sacked, and the Director General said, "You've got 1 week to convince me that you have an instrument we can put on a spacecraft, and it can be no more than n grams in weight." And he succeeded in doing that.
Yeah.
Because he basically produced a new logic as to how he detected life and the sensors that used for that. And he was successful. He then came back and told this all to William Golding, because that was near where I lived. And William Golding is in the same village. And William, who was an amazing chap, related this to the Gaia, and I now know, Sanskrit model that he had obviously studied. And that's how the Lovelock Gaia model was actually then broadcast. It took another 50 years for anybody to realize that actually this had a lot of validity.
Well, yeah, but then there were, what, 3 Chapman conferences on the Gaia hypothesis. I went to the first one. I was invited onto the epistemology panel.
Yeah.
I was very young at the time, and I was kind of freaked out. Oh my God, what do I had to look up what the word epistemology meant,
Yeah, well, I still have to.
So I was at the early stages, but I was going there thinking, okay, this is great, because definitely what he was saying was in line with what I was figuring out from ecology at the time. And so I'd written a paper, exploring the depths, some of the truth of what he was saying and trying to figure it out as to what it meant, And I thought that we would all be doing that and approaching it positively. But after I got there, I started to get some strange vibes and listening to people in different places. And eventually I figured out that most of the conference attendees were there to put the nail in the coffin and, to disprove it and to basically reject the whole thing. So then I was quite frightened about being on the epistemology panel, but turned out that it was scheduled for a 7 p.m. session, in the evening.
Yeah.
And I figured, well, okay, who's interested in epistemology and philosophy and in a science group? There, nobody is, and evening session, okay, we'll have a few people, we'll sit around and talk about it. It was booked in the largest hall of the conference center in San Diego. And there were 3 or 4 news channels there to record it. So I was petrified, and I quickly shortened my talk to about 5 minutes because fortunately the moderator of the panel, being a philosopher, was not used to that kind of attention. And so he took the opportunity to filibuster and took most of the time. So I got up and said, well, in the interest of saving some time, I'll just show one diagram here. And it was a diagram about how I saw the process of science working, to show that this whole idea we've been talking about, that worldviews are involved, and that the Gaia hypothesis is not really a hypothesis within our structured thinking. It's a worldview, and it's one that we need to explore. So most people didn't understand what I said, and so there was no objection or comment. I just sat down and thanked my lucky stars. And then David Abram from State University of New York got up there, and he's a very, very interesting person. We had a lot of interesting discussions over the meals. He's a PhD philosopher and also a magician. He was the first magician. He was the house magician at Alice's restaurant in New York. And he also became a bit of a shaman. And he does a lot of talks with Noetic Institute, and he says he got into shamanism exploring philosophy and going to South America. And he said he kind of lost himself and managed to pull himself back, but very interesting character. And he loves to talk. So he got up there and he said everything that I wanted to say.
It seems to me that this whole conversation is a discussion of the human condition. And you're going back to the ancients to find some germs of understanding that derive from how they were struggling to explain the inexplicable. And the challenge, I think, is if we're going to try to formalize it through these 4 causes, then we have to understand why there are only 4 causes and exactly what they are. Mm-hmm. Now, at the moment, we have a vague understanding of what they are, but we're struggling to try and translate those into modern terms. Yeah. We can do it in the simple Aristotelian way, like talking about material cause as just the wood that makes the table. But you are taking it much deeper than that, and translating it into terms that we can use to continue. The human condition is really about survival. Maslow articulated the various needs in layers that we have, from simple survival of food and drink and so on, right through to the high level needs we have for fulfillment and all that. And that's where religion in the godlike sense comes in to some degree, because a lot of people find it through that, which I think we personally don't. But we find it through other things like working or playing sport or reading or whatever we do. I think the challenge is to try and understand why there are any four causes, if the ancients were right in that, and then to articulate how they manifest themselves in modern times. Because in the end, our argument is that in order for us to survive as a human race, in fact, for all living things to survive in the future, if climate change is going to be as bad as it could be, then we've got to find a new way of thinking about it. And then, so we have to demonstrate that changing a worldview or changing our model of understanding will enable us to think differently through these things. But we then got to find examples, as Patrick says, in order to convince people. And that's why I think that translating these terms into the different disciplines is crucially important, because if you talk whole on to the average engineer, he doesn't want to know. I mean, why is, let's think about Gaia, for instance, for example. I mean, that has an intuitive sensibleness, if that's a word, about it. But I don't think it affects people's way of behaving much. Does it affect the way they decide what heating system to use, to put into their house, whether it's burning greenhouse gases or adding to carbon dioxide? I don't know. But you don't, big ideas like that don't really change behavior much.
Well, I contest that a little, David. Just obviously, John's got much more historical information about Lovelock and Gaia and so on and so forth. But there was, on Lovelock's 100th birthday, I think it was, a conference in Exeter, in which actually was very relevant to realizing the need to adopt the sustainable United Nations Sustainability Framework. In other words, suddenly people have woken up to the fact that until we start thinking about the way the Earth responds to what we're doing, we're going to continue to dig our grave, basically. And therefore, suddenly people were quite interested. Now,
I'm not saying no one appreciates it. I'm just saying that many people don't.
Generally, it's not.
It's not impacting.
Well, we're in a state of a weakening of the power of religion, anyway. And that
no, Patrick, that's a very UK view of life. It's very, very strong in other countries.
Well, that's true. I mean, I spent a lot of time in India, and it can be some of the most worldly people on a practical level. I mean, it isn't like everybody's trying to be a monk, you know, but there's an undercurrent of belief of some greater power, and that's never
Yeah.
questioned. It's like it's always there, and however you want to express that or use that in your work is fine, but that doesn't stop you from fighting and arguing and doing all kinds of things, you know.
Right. Well, I think you're right that everybody seems to have some view of there has to be a top-down form of control.
Right, and that's
And what-
seriously questioned by Western science. I mean, they've kind of tried to throw that out, and I think that's the resistance that comes up all the time, and it's deeply ingrained in our training.
Well,
And even if someone's not thinking that, it's a red flag that pops up in the back of the brain that says something's wrong with this, you know.
well, you're right, and if you go to the Chinese approach, they've tried to substitute that with the state. Basically,
That's right.
essentially, the state looks after all those things that you as an individual can't look after. That's
Right.
the concept that they have. And then they have this concept of loss of face,
Mhm.
which is basically saying, if I'm in charge of the state, you can't tell me I'm wrong.
Mhm.
So it's a generality of these things.
Mhm.
But as a systems thinker, I personally believe we have to understand that there's both top down and bottom up.
Yeah, so
And
totally.
you also have to understand that different people's top downs are different. This is what being transdisciplinary is about.
Yeah,
That we have to realize that our differences of view of what that top-down power is and fighting over it is useless.
Mhm.
It is self-destructive. And so we have to listen to each other as different points of view,
Yeah.
and then in terms of our purpose, reconcile what we're going to do.
Mhm.
That seems to be that is why I think the transdisciplinary approach is so important.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
let's
as far as
say-
the question you raised before, or somebody did, why are there four causes? That's,
Yeah,
you know,
that's me.
that I think we can put that to rest, in fact, you know, because first of all, as we've just seen in the comparison of Greek with Vedic, the Greek four causes came from the Vedic four causes. They were known since the earliest recorded transcription of oral tradition. And so to a large extent, throughout the entire history of human thinking, the four causes have been obvious.
I don't think that's good enough, though, John.
No, I don't think it is either.
Yeah,
But I didn't
offer
stop there.
something to help?
Gary's looking for a word.
Yeah. So the fact that the four causes correlate, and I use the word correlate with those ancient wisdoms and thoughts, I see that as verification. Yeah, supportive
Absolutely.
verification. Yeah,
That's what I was going to get to. Is
but
up until now they've
Yeah.
been questionable.
Yeah.
And people are not willing to accept that they're obvious. They say, "Oh, okay. Well, some people think they are, but I can't see how they work." And so,
yeah. But for me,
you
the
know, it's
valid.
just out there as some belief system.
Yeah.
But what we've
Well,
done,
it's a model. It's a way of understanding.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have to demonstrate its usefulness.
Yeah.
And in order to understand, to demonstrate its usefulness, we have to be able to translate them into modern terms.
Yeah.
So,
I think there's two things we have to demonstrate. We have to demonstrate its mathematical consistency, because mathematics is the only language that
yeah, that's the importance of your work. Yeah.
it brings in a trump card. It says, okay, if we're going to accept this as science, it has to be mathematically consistent. Now that I
Yeah.
think has been done. Now, people believing it, accepting it, that could take a long time, but Rosen certainly did his best to demonstrate it. Louis, his student, has done his best. I've done what I can do. It appears that it's not at least not dismissible. But the reason then, the answer to why there are 4 causes is because they mathematically form a whole. And without those 4, you can't get a closed whole system, a mathematically closed system.
Yeah.
I'm not
if you added
I'm not
more of them,
happy.
if you added another cause, you would be able to add into another holon, because you don't need any more causes to make the whole, but you need at least those 4. And then the thing is that it was a slight reinterpretation of what they mean to show that the closure takes place, because the way they were understood for thousands of years didn't allow the closure to be seen.
Yeah, I'm not totally happy with that answer, to be honest, but I am willing to accept it if we can translate it into modern terms and find it's useful.
Yeah. So
Because as an engineer, I don't believe we know anything absolutely. We don't know that absolutely there are 4 causes. We can model them either mathematically or empirically and find consistency and usefulness. But that doesn't prove it's the absolute truth, as it were, but it does take us further on. And, in that sense, I accept that it's worth doing and is useful to do. So what we have to do, as I said before, is translate them into more practical terms.
Yeah. So for me, the validation really comes when you look at the physics. I think there's physics behind it. Yeah. In terms of the informational events, the formation of knowledge, which is structured information, those structures then resulting in forces which manipulate energy and mass, and we see that in the physics. So that's one aspect of validation. The other aspect of validation, I think, is we can directly relate the four quadrants to our engineering experience. Yeah.
Can I adjust your language, Gary, a little bit, for a very good reason? I think you can certainly use it for verification in the systems sense of the word. Validation, I think, even if you believe that to be true, and obviously you do, you'd probably be wise to allow wiggle room for other people's point of view. Do you see what I mean?
Well,
if you assert this is the truth, you've switched them off from listening.
Of course, yeah. Well, see, I don't assert that it's the truth. What I claim is that it is mathematically valid. And so now there may be other frameworks that you can come up with. This other group that I'm involved in, they're working with octonians and things I don't understand in mathematics. So there may be other systems, but this system is mathematically consistent. Well, that's a criteria for accepting it at all, for using it at all, because if it's not consistent, we can reject it. And so it's not rejectable. And that's the real criteria for science. It does have problems. It cannot be 100% formalized. And that's because functors are not formalizable, it seems, unless somebody comes along someday and shows how they can be. I think you can formalize, functors are the relations between the 2 categories. I think you can formalize the functors in a given application. And you're making certain assumptions when you do that. I did that to come up with the four life types. I had to say, okay, exactly how does the relation work? And if it works in this way, in this very simplistic way, you get 4 types of life, and lo and behold, those show up in nature. So, but as a general schema, it's not an absolute truth, because you can't
Okay.
formalize those functors.
Well,
What you're saying, Sean, is it's necessary but not sufficient.
Not sufficient. Yeah, I suppose you could say that. What I'm really saying is that it is intrinsically incomplete. It describes its own incompleteness.
well, I think that I think we're all agreed that that's actually, from whatever point of view, where it's practical to stand. Because what I'm saying is, if we wish to take this forward into some form of effective outcome, then it is wise, and I'm using that word in its high level sense, it's wise for us not to assert that this is the truth. Anyway, now you're saying, no, this is not an assertable truth anyway. It has uncertainties about it, and therefore we leave that open. What we therefore have to do is to prove or demonstrate that it's useful.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I showed you this before. Did we ever share some diagrams that I have on the Higgs field, Higgs
I don't think you
boson?
did.
I'm sorry?
I don't think you did.
Okay, could
Yeah.
I show that real quick here, just as,
I'm
not to
happy.
go into it in any great detail, but just to make a point here about this thing that we're discussing. Let me share that screen, see if I can find it.
I think you tried to explain this to me over a beer once, and I didn't drink enough.
So this is, there's a problem in particle physics and the standard model of particle physics. And some years ago, Reiselman and some other people at CERN and came up with a new model for the symmetry. And this was in Symmetry magazine, CERN and Fermilab. And I looked, when I first saw this, I sort of kind of fell out of my chair, because what they published was a hold on. Here's each of the 4 quadrants with the subquadrants involved. The upper part here are massless particles, arguably the non-local side of things. It's even in the same orientation that I draw the hole on. On this side would be the phenotype and the genotype. The phenotype in this case would be light. These are photons. And the genotype would be mass and gravity. And I can't do much with that, but I couldn't help noting the similarity. There's the life diagram, and then apply it to the Higgs boson, and you have an exact match. And I mean, the coincidence of that is just kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's difficult to, I don't know enough about bosons and gluons to make a comment.
I don't either, except that this is, well, what I do know is that the W and Z, this is where mass is produced. And then, the idea is that the Higgs gives all the part, gives mass, is what is the field that gives mass to things. And these are massless. Photons are massless particles.
Yeah.
And so it is, the semantics of it and the number of particles and the pattern and their relation. Now, what's not in the physics right now is this relation between them. That has yet to be worked out. But the way they intuitively drew the diagram just falls right into the holon and gives us that relation.
Can you email that file to us, please?
Sure, yeah. But I don't know enough. I can't prove that these particles are the ones that, but that's the way they drew it, So that's just one case there.
In describing that, you talked about genotypes and phenotypes. I think that to me, is the clue as to how we can begin to explain what we're talking about to people. Because although if you ask the average engineer what a genotype is, everybody knows about genes now. And they know that people and things, living things have, have a genetic structure. So by isolating the idea that within an organism, the design of the resulting organism from the interaction between the genotype and the genome and the environment creates a phenotype, which is what you and I are. And I think that analogy relates to how we can think about engineering, in the sense that there isn't any genome in a bridge, for example, or an engine, but we do design them. So in a sense, the design process is creating the conditions under which interaction with the environment creates what it is that we're observing, the engine performing and the bridge carrying loads, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Maybe I could take a minute here and continue in that first, in the one that Gary put together and that I tried to comment on, because I go farther into that. I didn't get through the whole thing, but I then go in and say, okay, well, let's look at the other diagrams. And I guess you're seeing this, right?
Yeah.
So then the next slide, you had key principles: systems bring order to chaos. So now I'm rewriting it in terms of what the holon would say, that there's a cosmic order that's reflected in all systems. And if you recall the Vedic conundrum there, where they were trying to resolve the paradox of origin, we can't say it has. There was one. We're looking at a system that simply is, and we can't see the origin. And then it also says all systems are fundamentally complex. And then when you take that point of view, you say, okay, because that's completely heretical, right? We're trying to go from the simple to the complex. We're trying to say that material properties somehow get so jumbled up that you get a complex system. But Rosen tried to say that that's impossible. All you get is a complicated jumble of defined elements, and you don't get the complexity from simplicity. It has to go the other way around. So that's part of the justification of reasoning from the general to the specific, is that you simply can't get to the complex from the simple. But if you start with a complex reality, it's easily reduced to mechanisms, just interactions. We know that from physics, interactions cause decoherence, and you have defined properties, which then spread if there isn't any interaction, and they go back to superpositions. And complexity can be constructed. I don't know, I don't really have an idea of more or less complexity, but yeah, I mean, we're more complex in a sense than the fundamental complexity of the universe, but I don't see it as more complex, more complexity. I see it as a constructed complexity where we have many complex relations related to each other. And that's easily done in a living system by isolating the causes. Interaction breaks down any barrier, any causal barrier. If we erect causal barriers and you isolate things, then you can have internal models and the system becomes complex. So it becomes a very simple, very easy way of understanding both ends of the spectrum, both the classical world and the living world. And current, and the other way of looking at it, beginning with simple systems, makes everything mysterious. That's not a mechanism. We don't understand complexity, that's mysterious, and we don't understand life, that's very mysterious, and we don't understand consciousness, that's not even approachable. So it's clear that the current view won't work, and that this does. So anyway, so here's a rewrite of, and no objection to what's written there. It's just that we could simplify it: prior system, new context, new system. It's a back and forth, a two-step between the context and the realization. And the simplicity of it, I think it's pretty powerful. This was nice. I just put a few suggestions in there. No, nothing worth dwelling on. So then you had systems inquiry with 4 domains. So I just showed how they fall into the whole on. In philosophy, you develop theory from philosophy. You go about methodically applying the theory, and you have applications. The applications will reveal new phenomena that will inform future philosophy, and we keep going, and the whole cycle has an identity, which is, in this case, this is, as Gary said, a systems inquiry. So I'm just showing that, it tends to apply to a lot of things. This is kind of cool, and I didn't want to mess that up at all. And then we have this chart.
Go back to that one. Go back to that diagram.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what the 5 elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meant.
I didn't really look at it. Okay, yeah, this comes up in the next diagram. These are the Chinese terms for the 5 elements. In the Vedas, there's also 5 elements. So the Chinese came from the Vedic, just if you figure sequence of time, but they also talk to each other. So it's a reinterpretation of the Vedic 5. And these are not meant literally. These are qualities. And these are just like placeholder words. Fire is pretty obvious. The quality of fire is something energetic and that sort of thing. But these other ones I talked a lot with Thomas Wong about this, and it was very hard to understand what metal actually means.
Metal's the product.
Do you know, can you say something about that, Gary?
Yeah, it equates to the product.
To the what?
It's the product. It's the thing that is produced. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's what you produce through your act.
Yeah. Does it suggest some form of permanency?
Well, here, let's look at the next one because it
Solidity.
shows up in the next chart. So this one here, you have water, wood, metal, fire, and metal here is strategy, all right? Mental conditioning. So it's like the way we would use the word metaphorically to say, you know, somebody's metal, you know, referring to their strength, their power of mind and their determination. It's that kind of thing. And see, and these are, I mean, they're very metaphorical terms. But anyway, I looked at this, okay, I'm not quite sure what this is telling me. Well, why
I
this
couldn't make any
arrangement?
sense of that table, I must say. I couldn't
So
make any
anyway.
sense out of it.
If you were Chinese.
Okay,
it
so
would.
I decided to look to rewrite it in Holon terms, because that's the way I understand things. So there it is, the exact same terms in the previous diagram. They fall without any stretch of the imagination into two holons. One is a personal order, and the other is a cosmic order, because these are archetypical terms in the Chinese view, and we could substitute them for the Vedic terms. So those are like two ways of seeing the whole. As you said before, we don't want to just say this is the truth. Well, no, this is one way of describing those four qualities. There are other terms we could use. There could be four yogas in the Vedic tradition. They could be four elements. Well, it's actually five, because you have the whole. Mm-hmm. So this is the outer. Oh no, what is this? Yeah, this is the outer five. And oh no, this is the outer five. Sorry, yeah. And this is the more general one. But this is the source of ability, and you have ability on that previous one as one of the you have the decision maker, observer, and here's the observers and decision makers ability in system theory. So this is not just one quadrant, observers, decision makers. Well, so this I took as being the sum of these four, which is total ability. And then you have the idea that our personal power comes from a more general power in nature, which makes sense. We evolved from nature. So I'm just showing that, you know, if you're crazy like I am and you want to see everything in holons, you could. It tends to work out. Now this one, I think I just had gotten to that. So this the Eightfold Path in Buddhism. Buddhism came from the Vedic tradition, slightly reinterpreting it. Well, the holon has 8 elements, right? It has the 4 causes and the things that are caused and causing. And I think that, again, falls, it just drops right in there without any problem. Well, when I do that, it isn't just a good idea. I've put it into an architecture that I know is logically complete. It's a sound, mathematically provable logic. Whereas, yeah.
The word system at the bottom, should that be system?
It's system, yeah. Let's fix that.
I thought you'd invented another word.
No, sorry.
Have to be careful.
Rosen calls this the natural system, so I should probably call it natural system too. But Aristotle calls this actuality, in this potentiality.
Yeah.
But I think you might agree that where I place these terms makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's encouraging that you can do that. I'd need to study this. I don't know what the Bhakti view is. I don't know enough about it to be able to comment. But the fact that you who do understand that can see these relationships is more power to the elbow. But I don't think it helps us as engineers to translate these into terms that are going to mean something in terms of what we're going to do about climate change, for example.
Yeah. Well, what orients me the best?
We're talking at a level which needs to be translated into something more practical in our sense of the word.
Can I just ask you to suspend disbelief for a moment? And I have a view which says that part of our problem in engineering is that we haven't yet got to a stage of understanding how ecosystems work. Right now, ecosystems are the natural form of systems throughout the world. And yet we are still, and I think you were doing it, we are still trying to reduce the problem to one we can logically understand. So like a spacecraft, we try to isolate the components of the system within their boundary so that we can get control over them. Whereas in natural systems like the ancient woodland across the valley from where I live here, there is a whole complexity of relationships going on in there, which actually enables it to be remarkably successful. So what I'm saying is, if engineers could get to grips with understanding how ecosystems work, and we've got plenty of them around, inside us as well as outside us and around us and all the rest of it, we might have a model that could begin to help us to come to terms with nature. So that's a pure, what's the word? Vision, basically, at this stage. It may have some substance to it, I don't know, but it seems to me that if we're in the business of designing systems, we ought to actually get to grips with how some of the most successful systems on this earth actually work.
Well, let's do that real quickly. I mean, I'm just going to, here, let me just copy this. I'll just insert a duplicate slide and work there. So let's make this describe an ecosystem instead of a psychology or a human system. This is the niche. This is tractors. Action is action in the world. This is ecological dynamics. And this is the state of the system.
Yeah, I can go along with that.
And okay, so now this is the natural system, as Rosen described it. The state of the system is in some way interpreted. Okay, livelihood even holds up here. Okay, forget the Vedic terms. What I was referring to here is meditation. These are the 5 paths of not meditation, I mean of yoga. These are the 5 yogas in Vedic thinking. This is devotional. Well, what you have is some contextual model being formed here.
The one I'm having trouble with, John, is the tractor as a formal. What can you explain what Jnana is?
Well, an easy way to think about this is in terms that are used typically in ecological modeling and environmental modeling, is boundary condition.
Well, isn't an attractor a kind of state of possible existences?
Well, what
An
it,
area,
yeah.
a zone where something could end up in.
Well, see, for instance, okay, you have a bowl and you throw a marble into a bowl and it rolls around in a circle and spirals toward the middle, right?
Yeah.
Well, the bowl is creating an attractor for the dynamics of the ball. The ball can only follow that one path, or not one path. It can only follow that one kind of path. You know,
Okay, I see it now.
It's constrained.
Yeah. That's formal.
Well, it's the same thing. So this is a constraint on what the dynamics can do. Another example I use is like if we're talking about the dynamics of a chainsaw, you know, it cuts things, and it can cut pretty much a lot of things. You know, it can cut the trees, it can cut your house and the table and everything else. This is what determines what it's going to cut. That's a boundary condition on where. So this is like existence, and this is operation. And I think that's really important distinction for engineering, because the origin and existence of something is a very different logic than how it operates in the world. And if I have, you know, some process, dynamical process, that's described by a general equation, F equals ma or something like that, that doesn't tell me where that process is going to exist. And if I can control where it exists and where it doesn't exist, that changes the entire result, right? It's like a regulator, and in biology you have that. You have catalysts and you have rate regulators. So this is determining the existence of the operation, and if we leave that out, then we're trying to explain existence from operation, and very difficult to do directly. I mean, you can't do it directly. It's you have to go through this cycle.
And that leads us to one of the problems I've got, is how we give examples of structures and functors in a real example.
Yeah.
I mean, they are, in simple terms, many-to-many mappings.
Right.
So how do we capture that in order to explain it to someone who doesn't know what a structure and a functor is?
Yeah, well, it turns out that these terms that came from Gary's chart of the Buddhist thing works. I mean, speech is like that, right? It's a function, a functor, and you know, you can tell me something, but you're not going to be able to draw a precise map between what you said and what I ended up doing. You know.
Oh, understanding, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a one-to-one map, is it? But it's an expression. It's an expression from the contextual side, from the existence side of things, into the operation.
I can see that one. What about the structure?
Well, livelihood seems to work for me. I mean, what you do every day to earn a living is
what
the structure.
What do you mean by livelihood?
Well, Gary, what was meant in the Buddhist diagram by livelihood? I just threw the term in here. I didn't define it.
Living
right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
living. Yeah.
yeah. But that's all the result of this dynamical system, right? This is going to this grocery store, talking to your neighbors, you know, fighting or not fighting with a political figure, and how you live.
That's useful.
Yeah.
That's
So-
helped me a bit. Mm.
Yeah, and so it includes time. Its structure is like, you know, a building, but it's also a structure in time. You know, there's the building and it's the slow decay of the building. It's the end result of all the dynamics of the system, of all the operations. It's like, where do we end up? You know, and then what does that mean? That's what the niche does. It says, okay, what is all this material result, including time variation, what does it mean?
Yeah.
And it means different things in different contexts. So this is just a way of decomposing things into whole concepts.
The other problem I'm having is understanding one of your figures in your paper where you compose the relationships between different holons at different levels. I can't really get to grips with the diagram in your paper.
Is that the first paper, the 2011?
Can't remember.
Which paper is it? There's been some evolution.
Relational science of synthesis, yeah.
Yeah, that's 2011. That was the first one I did.
I don't think
And,
I've got any more.
It's, yeah, it's still valid. I don't think anything in that has really been contradicted, but I might describe it a little differently and use some different examples. I mean, what I was pretty, let me just see if I
It's your
can.
fig 6. Your fig 6. I've struggled with that this morning, trying to.
Okay, let me pull that up and let's look. I haven't looked at it in a while. I mean, I could be surprised that, you know, I now disagree with something I said there, but I'm not so sure.
Do you want me to share it?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, have I chosen the wrong one?
That's a good, that's good. So can you close that little box there that says find?
I've lost it now. Well, I've lost the whole thing. My
Oh,
Zoom
on
was
the
all together.
screen.
We see it.
I've lost Zoom altogether. Where has it Zoom disappeared to?
You may have to go down to that thing with the video camera on a blue background to find it.
I've got nothing at all.
Well, have you got a bar with things on?
No, Zoom's gone altogether. I don't know why.
Because you're working.
You're definitely still there.
It's even transmitting your screen.
Yeah.
I usually
Anyway,
find,
can you see the diagram?
I can see it, A diagram, figure 6.
But it
It
has
has
something, it has something on top of it.
Yeah.
A little box there says find, there's a search box. And if we can get rid of that, we can see it better.
Well, I can't find my Zoom screen at all.
Try doing Alt
Okay,
Tab.
well, why don't you close your share and I'll share the same document.
I can stop David sharing if you want me to.
Yeah, can you? Because I don't know. I can't get at it.
There you go.
Oh, it's come back now. I don't know what happened there.
Should I just go ahead and share it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Uh, Okay, so there it is. Hopefully
Fig
those,
6.
I guess this is a proof, but hopefully that won't get in our way too much. Yeah, this is taking me back a while.
Yeah, I bet.
It's the only paper of yours I've seen.
Oh, really? Well, I have to send you the latest ones because I try to, each paper I try to review
There it
and
is.
There you are.
explain it. I try to review it and explain it better. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to show how we formalize the relations. So I'm trying to say, okay, these are the causalities, right? These are the mapping arrows.
It's
So-
the A, the B, and the F, and the S and the F. Is
This
F
one?
for functor and S for structure?
Right, okay. So the early work, I had things rotated 90 degrees, right? So now I put all the dash stuff on top and the solid lines on the
Yeah,
bottom.
that's not a problem.
Okay, I thought that would be confusing for folks, but because Rosen did it this way, I started out this way. And then all the other framework thinkings, we tend to have mind on the top and physical system on the bottom. So this is the physical system, and this is the mental or contextual system.
Yeah,
So that's what I'm saying there. And the underline, see B underline, I use the underline to indicate context, to indicate the mental side of things.
yeah, I've got that one.
And then uppercase is the ontology, and lowercase is the epistemology. So these are function and structure.
Yeah,
And I just, I had to decide, actually, these exist in both worlds or between them, but I made function part of the natural system because we typically do, we say F equals MA and F is a function. So I'm associating there. And then this structure, okay, we could just include that as part of the physical system too. It's the end result, but really I'm talking about structure in context. And this is function from context. So this function comes from some kind of contextual model. And then, then you can see, okay, decoding and encoding, these are not entailments. These are not exact mappings. These are the functors. And I didn't put that into this legend back then, but these are the functors. And they can't be exact mappings, whereas these can be exact mappings. So I do say mapping. So these are entailments and these are relations. So that's a difference. And what was I trying to show here? Realized efficient material map.
so
It's
what's
just
happening in B? What's F and F underscore? Are they just, how are they related to A and B?
Where now? Over here?
B, 6B.
Oh, here. Yeah. Okay. So this is simply the holon, right? It's the same diagram as we have there, except in this case, I'm using F for all of the terms. That's why I adopted the italic, the upper and lower case, and the underline conventions, so that instead of labeling everything with different letters, as in Rosen's original life diagram, I could say this is the F holon. And it still has the same for.
That's what I assumed. Okay. But you don't
Yeah.
make life easy by not explaining what F relates to A and B, that's all. To
Yeah,
the
it should be
reader.
explained a little better. But, and then what's going on here is I'm showing, okay, this can be related to other holons. So this is the F holon, and it can be related to other external ones. Well, in the later work, I show that it can be related to internal ones as well. Let me see
Well,
where I end.
if you
Mhm.
take the top F, the small f, lowercase f,
Yeah,
it is sending an efficient cause to another holon and receiving
that's right.
a formal cause from another holon.
Correct. So another
Is that
holon,
the same holon or
no,
are there
this is
two?
one holon. This is the F holon. So some other holon could be contextualizing the efficient cause in this holon.
Yeah, what I'm trying
That would make it complex, right? Because it's got its own model and it has somebody else's model, both. And it's like, husband and wife trying to agree on, it gets complex. So this
Yeah.
is you as your ideas, and here's your wife trying to tell you what she thinks.
Yeah, I understand that, John. But what I'm trying to do is, what I would like you to do is to draw another holon.
Mhm.
In other words, the F, lowercase f, uppercase underlined, lowercase f underlined, another
Yeah.
one with different letters, and then draw the links between the two that
Yeah,
those
I think
represent.
I think we do that later. Let me see if we get there.
Well, I couldn't find it.
Well, it's certainly in the later papers, so I need to send you additional papers. Well, in a way, this is doing it, right? Because
I got so stuck with Fig 6, I couldn't get anything out of Fig 7.
Well, see, now what I show here in 7 is take the basic idea, which we saw in 6. Just now I'm using curved lines instead of straight lines.
Yeah.
Which doesn't change anything. This is an identity for system S. So this is system S, just like the other one was system F.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Now I want to explain how we get time in this model. We have the idea that a given material result, a structure, changes in time from S1 to S2. And we see it as a smooth change of S into S2. Well, in the holon view, that's not exactly the way it's depicted. What happens is S1 could be identified as a holon, but in fact, whenever S1 goes back into its the classical context of the system, we get a sequence. The minimum reduction that can be done is a time sequence. So now we get S2, and that's part of the system too. And so actually what we get is a sequence of movie frames, which instead of a continuous motion, it's a S is being recreated each cycle. It's being recreated slightly different by a time step.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be time, but that
helps.
Yeah.
Gary's saying we need to wrap up, so
I'm afraid
okay.
that
so.
helps.
All right.
But,
and this is showing closure between two holons, which you were asking.
Oh my gosh, I must have. I'm supposed to be on another Zoom.
Oh dear, yeah, no, me too. In a little while.
Thank you for reminding us.
Yeah, we can wrap up.
Okay.
I'll send you some of the later papers. This one, mutually realized. There's another one like this where I show emergence. When you're combining two contexts, that's when you get a new function. And that was actually the basis of producing the life diagrams. which I'm pretty sure are in here. So there's Rosen's life diagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one I
I've
said,
struggled-
I want to
struggled with
rethink.
all those.
Yeah, 10, I want to rethink that because I'm not sure I can show this in terms of mappings. I have to think about what I was actually trying to say there. Anyway, so then this is just using the math to combine the things and, oh, I don't get to the new picture of the Holon. So I got to show you how we get to the more simplified view of the Holon. It comes from this, and that's where you get the circle with the 4 quadrants closed. I guess
But we've got to find something simpler than that, John, somehow.
yeah, this is not used.
We're going to reduce that down to something simpler.
Well, I did, and that's the Holon diagram you've seen in other work, where it's just a single circle with 4 circles inside, and those exactly reproduce this. It's just more organized than this. But this is useful in showing that one of the life types can easily compartmentalize into a nucleus and an organelle, because the crossings are minimal here, whereas other life types can't. They can't compartmentalize, and that turns out to be true in the taxonomy. This is the only type that can compartmentalize, and I can show relationally, mathematically, why that's true. Anyway,
Okay.
we do have.
So where are we going to go now?
It's up to you guys.
I think we still need to find a simple representation that is really meaningful for everyone.
Has Patrick gone?
He had to go. Yeah, he did wave.
Huh.
Yeah. So
Okay.
my suggestion is that we go away and think about it. It might be worth taking another look at the slides that John has sent round. There's one chart on there which shows lots of different representations of different stuff in the one matrix, which might be interesting. Anyway, gonna have to go, I'm afraid. But let's communicate by email and see if we can agree what we want to do next time. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Okay.
That was an
Cheerio.
interesting discussion. All right. Bye.